throw me into the mix, and trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the world headquarters of GB News, this is Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. The weekend starts here, so bring your own drinks. The admission is free. On tonight's show, as we hand over British territory to Mauritius, are the Falkland Islands safe in Sir Keir Starmer's hands? As rumours swirl that Gary Lineker is about to leave Match of the Day, would the BBC be better off without Britain's wokest presenter? Also tonight, should the new leader of the Conservatives bring back Boris? And will Labour voters be next to turn their support to Nigel Farage and Reform UK? Coming to blows over those topics and many more tonight, my Friday A-Team. Senior reporter at political website Guido Fawkes, the freshly promoted Ellie Wheatley. We've also got BBC radio legend Alex Dyke and fearless trade unionist Andy Twelves. But we start with my Friday feeling monologue. Will this be Britain's last ever Labour government? I'll be answering that question straight after these headlines and the unsackable Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you very much. The top stories. Downing Street insists it's still to return the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Does not change the approach to other overseas territories. It comes as Argentina's now pledging to gain full sovereignty of the Falkland Islands. However, the government insists its commitment to the Falklands is unwavering. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson told GB News this morning that he thinks the deal is crazy.
Yeah. Chagos Islands being given back to Mauritius. Your reaction?
Crazy. I mean, I urge viewers of GB News to get out your maps, get out your atlases, check out the Chagos Islands, see where they are, see where Mauritius is. A long way away.
Yes.
What is this claim? It's nonsense. It's total nonsense. Why are we doing this? Sheer political correctness.
In other news, Sir Keir Starmer's announced what he calls a game-changing £22 billion funding package for projects that capture and store carbon emissions. Speaking to workers in Liverpool this morning, he said the investment in so-called carbon capture clusters will create thousands of jobs, bring in investment and help meet climate goals. However, Green campaigners warn the move could prolong oil and gas production, with the projects not set to begin storing carbon until 2028. Following his speech, our political correspondent Catherine Forster challenged the Prime Minister over the costs.
With renewable energy, you get lower energy costs for good, not just for one winter, not, capping for a few months in necessary circumstances, but lower energy bills for good because renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels. That is really important. You get independence and security. By doing renewables here in Britain, you're not relying on the international market. And therefore, even if there are international conflicts that affect the price of energy, we would have our own supply, which is independent. And of course, what you get is the next generation of jobs.
And the US President Joe Biden has this evening said that he would think about alternatives to striking Iranian oil fields if he were in Israel's shoes, adding that he thinks Israel has not yet concluded how to respond to Iran. That's after, of course, Iran shot over 180 ballistic missiles towards Israel in the last few hours. That's as more airstrikes have been reported in southern Beirut as Israel tells more than 30 villages in the south of Lebanon to evacuate. And an Israeli strike has cut off a road near a Lebanese border crossing, according to the country's transport minister. It, of course, follows a night of blasts across Beirut. the past 24 hours, at least 45 people have died across Lebanon as Israel launched its most intense airstrikes on the capital. The UK Foreign Secretary earlier confirmed a third government-chartered flight for British evacuees had left Lebanon. Israeli forces are also escalating ground operations in the south, targeting Hezbollah militants. In Gaza, airstrikes have pushed the death toll to over 41,000 since the conflict began. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. Now it's back to Mark Dolan.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. You do have to wonder, don't you, whether our new Prime Minister has a political death wish. After the freebie scandal finally runs out of steam, Sir Keir Starmer makes headlines on the subject again this week by returning a paltry £6,000. That's right, £6,000 for the gift of Taylor Swift tickets. Now, that's fine, £6,000, but what about the other £100,000 worth of freebies that he's accrued since 2019? The latest scandal for the party is a cash for access row involving the business secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. Now, the Sun newspaper has reported that a Labour Party commercial team, I'm amazed there is one, I thought they hated capitalism, offered company chiefs a chance to gain insight with Mr Reynolds in exchange for £30,000. And what are those insights you'd be paying £30,000 for? The insight that Labour are going to scrap 0 hours contracts, the freedom and independence of which over 1 million workers enjoyed last year alone. A policy which removes the incentive on businesses to hire casual workers. Would they be paying £30,000 for an insight into Labour's proposals to make it harder for companies to sack useless employees, possibly from day one of their employment, to placate their ever more powerful unions? Is it the red tape or a feared raid on capital gains that you'd be paying £30,000 to hear all about? Any entrepreneur foolish enough to pay this huge amount of money will be choking on their complimentary croissant and cappuccino. Meanwhile, Angela Rayner, who is a bad headline machine, reportedly received the gift of a visit to a DJ booth worth over £800 whilst raving at an Ibiza nightclub, even though she said at the time that she was visiting in a friendship capacity. So, 800 quid, the price of friendship with the self-titled ginger growler. Worth every penny. Ultimately, this freebie scandal will blow over. But this government has now officially vacated the moral high ground, and the public will not forget. Labour are permanently tainted. If the Tories and Reform stop squabbling like rats in a sack, this could be the last Labour government for decades, and they would only have themselves to blame. Amid the appalling optics of this new government, it's easy to forget about the terrible policies that they got as well, isn't it? A much-feared October budget tax raid, which will see wealth creators run for the hills and blunt economic growth, betting the house on flaky renewables, and now handing over vast chunks of UK territory to the allies of our enemy. Ceding sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius is an embarrassing capitulation which plays into the hands of China, who share close trade ties with Mauritius. Beijing will be celebrating tonight. They might even get a Chinese in. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who represents Britain overseas, and frankly, I'd rather have Prince Andrew, said that the deal settled the contested sovereignty of the islands. But the truth is that this deal will be costly in the long term as we pay through the nose to have a military base there. It undermines Britain's allies in the region and gives China the chance of gaining a military foothold in the Indian Ocean. Well done, everyone. After the disastrous handover of Hong Kong to China, the residents of which have now lost free speech, political expression and open markets, we shouldn't be doing anything that helps the Chinese whatsoever. So which other British territories are we going to give away? Maybe we should give away Bristol as an apology for slavery. Perhaps we should give away Stratford-upon-Avon. We know what a dreadful coloniser William Shakespeare was. How How long will it be before Starmer doesn't just hand over Wales to a foreign autocratic regime as an apology for Tom Jones? This is a strategic, military, cultural and political mistake. Next up, expect a capitulation to the EU in a hellish post-Brexit reset with Brussels, which will be remain by stealth. Britain's sovereignty, influence and independence is shrinking, not growing. If only we could give away this Labour government. Well, for reaction tonight, my Friday A-team, Ellie Wheatley, Alex Dyke and Andy Twelves. Ellie, a warm welcome to Mark Dolan's show.
Thank
Friday night with Mark Dolan. How are you? Great to have you on board. First of all, could this be the last Labour government ever?
Well, the thing is, it usually takes a new government about 18 months for the cracks to start showing. It's taken Starmer's Labour less than 80 days. And the one thing that everyone hates is hypocrisy. And we've seen that so much over the last few weeks. I mean, Mr. Rules, Mr. Integrity, constantly berating the Tory government for accepting freebies, not declaring donations properly, and now, of course, he's done it all the same himself. I mean, of course, we saw he was broadcasting his stay-at-home, work-from-home, even if it's inconvenient, whilst bashing the Tories for not doing so back in 2021, when, of course, he was actually filming it from Lord Ali's £18 million penthouse rather than his own home.
A story broken by your own news website, Guido Fawkes.
Indeed.
You've had lots of exclusives. You've been watching Starmer closely. Do you think the press have got more on this guy? Is there more to come on Starmer and Labour, do you think?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Number 10 are definitely in meltdown about Starmer. And various rumours are swirling around Westminster about, you know, his various relationships. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see.
We'll have to see. Watch this space. What do you think? Are Labour in terminal decline? Do you think they've got any chance of winning the next election, Alex Dyke?
This is great fodder for us in the media. Keir seems to put his foot in it every other day. I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's like a farce. It's like a comedy. And this giving this £6,000 back, to me, looks like an admission of guilt. Well, once you start doing that, it looks to me like a bit like an admission of guilt. And if I had borrowed, let's take some zeros off it, Mark. Let's say I borrowed 100 quid from you, right?
Yeah.
I said, give us 100 quid, Mark. I need 100 quid for a couple of weeks. And then I come back to you and say, look, I'm going to give you £6 back. You're going to think, keep it. £6 quid.
What is the point? Yeah.
So the whole thing seems to have been so badly managed. If you think about the Taylor Swift tickets, for instance, I want to see our Prime Minister at Wimbledon at the FA Cup. They are VIPs. I want to see them there. It's good for Britain to see the royal family and VIPs there. But don't take free tickets. Have a special VIP from the promoter. Because when I think of those Taylor Swift tickets, I think of all of the thousands and thousands of 14-year-old teenage girls who would have done anything for those tickets.
Yeah.
And to me, it's ridiculous.
I think it's crazy. Andy Twelves, you must be tearing your hair out as, on paper, a Labour supporter. Particularly Starmer's decision to hand back 5% of the cash that he's accrued since 2019.
I mean, I'm more than a Labour supporter, just on paper. I'm a paid-up member. I have my direct debit every month. But, I mean, yeah, I think the way that Alex has been painting it isn't quite accurate. I mean, this isn't just, you know, 100,000 or whomever or whatever from one person. It is a few different people in different organisations. So I think it's a bit disingenuous to go, oh, well, he's only given back £6,000 out of the X that he's been given, when it's actually, oh, well, he's given that back to that person and X. You know. I think we are getting kind of bogged down in...
But this £6,000 means that we're talking about it all over again. Doesn't that represent his terrible political, poor antenna, his terrible judgment?
Well, I mean, I'm sure Number 10 have made the decision, and the reasons that they've made this decision are somewhat beyond my thinking, but, I'm sure that there is a reason behind it. But, at the end of the day, this is all going to blow over. Like, 5 years ago, Boris Johnson had just won a pretty large majority. No one thought that the Tories would be blown into oblivion 5 years later. The next election is 5 years away. 5 years is a long time.
But every time it blows over, Andy, there's another calamity. And then another one.
And the thing about Starmer's press team is they constantly think about how to fight back on the current story. They're not thinking ahead of what the next story is going to come out. Either Starmer needs to come clean about everything, or they should be thinking, you know, how to mitigate
But isn't
the
this
next
because
story.
at the heart of it, Keir Starmer has a very poor political judgment? I just don't think the guy has great political instincts myself. I know he's just won an election with a historic landslide,
But
I just think he's
Tories.
politically club-footed. What do you think?
I agree with you. I mean, listen, he's a lawyer at the end of the day. I mean, he's the Starmbot, Sir Stammer. You know, he doesn't exactly have charm and charisma.
Britain's first AI Prime Minister.
Exactly.
I don't think this is to do with politics, Mark. I think this is just to do with the kind of man he is. And maybe he's blessed with this, or he must be blessed with a fabulous brain to have been the lawyer he was, but that doesn't mean to say that he's full of common sense. I don't think this has anything to do with politics. I think this has to do with the man. And I think once you get the man and maybe a PR team that can't read him very well,
yeah.
That's why you're getting calamity after calamity.
Andy, I'll tell you what I think. I think I might be exaggerating to say that this could be the last Labour government ever. But I cannot see the public voting for Keir Starmer in 4.5 years' time. So I think if Labour go to the country when they do, he won't be in charge. What do you think?
I mean, I have full confidence in my party leader and the Prime Minister.
Kiss
but,
of death.
well, you know, but...
the dreaded vote of confidence.
Indeed, indeed.
But now you've got to say, I don't foresee the circumstances.
You know, I couldn't possibly comment. But I think, you know, talking about the man that he is, you know, this is the man that stood against McDonald's when he was a barrister for normal people. This was a man that was Director of Public Prosecutions. I think when you speak about his character, you do have to give a nod to, well, yeah, he actually does have quite a bit of common sense and he does actually stand up generally for what's right. And if you look at his track record, I think that is fair.
Do you think he can turn this around and make himself popular at some point?
I think so, yeah.
But he doesn't practice what he preaches. You know, he's always talking about how he's missing integrity. He's just completely blown up that whole image.
Isn't this because he says, I haven't broken the rules? So in his book, if he hasn't broken the rules, nothing's wrong. But Keir, it doesn't look very good.
Exactly, especially when you've been blasting the Tories for doing the exact same stuff for the last 14 years, you know.
Yeah, most definitely. And briefly, he got into a bit of a contretemps with Beth Rigby, and she went viral with a video from her podcast saying that the Prime Minister was very angry and she was extremely uncomfortable just in his presence. You know, so he's not taken this crisis very well, has he? And I do think he's failed his first test of character.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think the clear thing is that he's not a man of principles. You know, he's the sort of one that says, well, if you don't like my principles, I have others, you know. So, yeah, I mean, how can you trust him?
Always nice to squeeze in a Groucho Marx quote where you can. Now, next up, is the British pint under threat? And as rumours swirl that Gary Lineker is about to leave Match of the Day, would the BBC be better off without Britain's wokest presenter? We'll debate that next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Founded in 1990 in Knightsbridge in London, the Beverly Hills Bakery offers some of the finest American baked goods in the United Kingdom. Beverly Hills Bakery has delivered gifts to all the UK Prime Ministers of the last 20 years, with, I think, the exception of Sir Keir Starmer so far, and provided gifts for the royal family and for royal births. As we near the 35th anniversary of the bakery, I'm joined by the owner and head pastry chef, Rosa de Souza, and Manuel de Souza, who is the director of the Beverly Hills Bakery. How marvellous to see you both. Welcome to GB News.
Thank you for inviting us.
So, why has this formula worked? Why did London need a Beverly Hills Bakery?
What we do is we're a bakery, but underlying it's actually a gifting experience.
Right.
So this is an alternative to flowers. So in terms of concept, that has maintained its originality despite going on for 35 years. And in fact, what I do is I often ask myself, why is it going strong? To remind myself to focus on those things that we need to focus on.
So instead of sending a bunch of flowers, you send a beautiful box of cakes like that, or confection like that, complete with bunnies and so on.
Exactly. So you have the concept on the one hand, but you also need the quality of product that goes inside. And I think that's where Beverly Hills Bakery has got a great product.
And it's where Rosa comes in, isn't it?
Yes.
So when did you start to bake? Did you start to bake domestically in your home, and did it spread from there?
We started from home. My mother's baking, where we didn't have all the stoves and things like that. We baked on the charcoal, you know, like figurines.
Yes.
And we started baking. I learned from my mother the baking.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, the founder of the Wetherspoons pub chain, Tim Martin, has said the idea of axing the British pint is daft. So, should we fight to keep this great British tradition? Andy Twelves, are you a pint man or a half pint?
Oh, pint. Well, a schooner at times, I feel. You know, if I'm having a real ale, I'll have a schooner.
Now, what is a schooner? It sounds like a medical condition.
It's a 2/3 of a pint. It's quite a nice kind of tasty glass.
What fancy nightclub would sell you a schooner?
You can get them at Green King. Yeah, but of course, other pub chains are available.
No normal pubs do a schooner, do they?
Yeah, Green King do.
Is that right?
Yeah. But anyway, I am a pint man.
No wonder they're in so much trouble.
But I think this story is quite funny because it was about a year ago we had the story that came out saying that wine was only going to be served in pints because of EU regulation, and now we've gone full circle to going, well, beer can't even be served in pints.
Wait, so pint of wine?
Pint of champagne.
Yeah, wasn't Big Sam Allardyce, former England manager, famous for ordering a pint of wine?
Yes. Well,
and he was condemned for it, and I just thought, fair play.
You know what? You should do what you want to do. Nanny State should not be getting involved.
Well, you know what a pint of wine is, Alex? It's just honest, isn't it? Yeah. Because people are going to go, oh, I'll have another glass. The bottom line is you've done a pint or two, haven't you?
Exactly.
You've had a good lunch.
Yes.
What about you, Ellie? Do you drink pints?
Of course I do.
Can I just say that was probably the most sexist question I've ever asked in my life.
No.
So you asked me it as well, to be fair. So.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Of course I drink a pint. I mean, can you imagine going, mate, fancy going to the pub to have a quick 2/3? What? It's ridiculous. 2/3 of a pint, first of all, is not a pint.
It's a schooner, that's the point.
A schooner. And I mean, it's ridiculous. First of all, it's a British tradition.
Correct.
We should be able to do what we want to do. And I mean, I know that the government haven't necessarily looked at it too seriously, but they obviously have done it in Australia, haven't they? And it hasn't actually shown that people are drinking less.
No way.
Of course not. And I don't think we would either, as us Brits. So I think the whole thing's preposterous. And I think Tim's absolutely correct to call it daft. Actually, he should have called it completely nonsensical.
Yeah, because the point about pint is it lasts a while, so you can nurse that pint, can't you? And
Yes.
if you're in boring company, you can just sort of slowly be sipping this thing. If you had a schooner or whatever the hell it was called, you know, that's gone in 3 seconds.
Also, it looks a bit pathetic, doesn't it?
Well, it's 3/4 of a pint, but I don't think... Andy said this is funny. I don't think this is funny. I reckon we can rewind to the year 2000, all right? We went into New Year, we were going into the millennium, and everybody was selling tickets for pubs that night. It was going to be the biggest night ever, and guess what? People stayed at home. And it kind of collided with the beginning of the Xbox and the PlayStation and supermarket booze becoming very, very cheap, the smoking ban, and it's killing, all those things together started to kill the British pub. We need to we need to remember what King Charles said when he was Prince Charles, the pub is the hub. We need to save the British pint. I think this is a huge story.
Yeah, definitely. And we just handed over a load of islands to Mauritius, OK, which is great news for the Chinese. We've got to keep our unit of currency for alcohol, Andy, particularly as Britain sort of drops down the global league table for sort of economics and diplomacy and military and all the rest of it. We've got to drown our sorrows. We need a pint.
Well, absolutely. You know, after 14 years of Tory Britain, you know, I certainly needed a pint. And I will, you know, I think this, as Ellie said, it's a bit of a non-story. I don't think the government are seriously considering it, but, you know, I'll get on the phone to Keir and have a word if he does consider banning the pint.
I mean, they're banning smoking outside of pubs, in gardens.
Well, that's not been confirmed yet.
Yeah, talking about pubs closing closing earlier as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
and pubs will just be shutting up shop like every week.
Are Labour the fun police?
Oh, no, well, I don't think so. But I would say a big win for nightlife recently. Amy LeMay, London's night czar, has officially resigned. So this is a huge win. Cross-partisan joy has been spread by her resignation. It's huge.
Well, let's stay on good news, shall we? Rumours abound that stressed-out staff at the BBC Match of the Day programme are worried about the possible departure of Gary Lineker after 25 years in the top job. What a nightmare. How will viewers cope if someone else that's far cheaper and less political reads a teleprompter and introduces football clips? There's something about the way that St Gary says, here's the latest action from Selhurst Park, which marks him out as irreplaceable. No one else could do that. No one else could say, here's the latest action from Selhurst Park. Not like he does. It's a rare gift. And if, God forbid, he does go, Match of the Day viewers will miss hearing this ex-footballer's views on climate change. After all, he loves Greta Thunberg even more than he loves Alan Shearer. His views on Britain's migration policies, comparing anything that he doesn't like to 1930s Germany. And, of course, his measured and well-balanced assessment of the October the 7th massacre, the worst single attack on Jewish people since the actual Holocaust, which he sensitively described as the Hamas thing. There is no way that Match of the Day can survive without St Gary Lineker. In fact, £1.3 million a year, his current salary, is an insult to this intellectual colossus. I would double it. And rebrand our national state broadcaster as Gary Lineker's BBC. Listening to a multimillionaire opining on the state of the world is exactly what licence fee payers, including poverty-stricken old ladies shivering in their homes this winter, are coughing up their money for. In fact, it takes over 8,000 licence fee payers alone just to cover Gary's annual salary. Worth every penny. What an own goal it would be to lose him. So what do you think, Alex Dyke? You are a former BBC star yourself, of course, a legend of BBC Radio. Gary Lineker, should he stay, should he go?
I think it's time for Gary Lineker to go. The BBC got rid of me when I was 61. He's 63, so he's had a very, very good run. I think if you're taking 1.3 million from the BBC as a wage packet, then maybe there's a good reason for you not to be advertising Walker's crisps and being political. You either do the ads and take maybe a smaller wage, but I don't think you should be being political like he's being. When I worked at the BBC in the South, there was a guy there who did our sport called Tony Husband. And Tony was fabulous. And I always thought, why have we got Gary... And Tony went off to do American football for television in America in the end. But I thought, why are we paying Gary Lineker all of this money, like you say, just to say, and now we're going to see what the Gunners are doing for Arsenal? Why Gary Lineker? He used to be kind of cool, a little bit. He was very trustworthy and he was an England legend in the 80s. But he's kind of, I think, become tarnished and very uncool. And I think it's time for him to go. I think 1.3 million is a disgrace, really, for just introducing Match of the Day.
Ellie, why do the BBC allow their stars to be so untouchable and to be so overpaid?
Yes, so, I mean, it makes no sense that he's paid so much, especially when 500,000 people cancelled their licence fee membership last year, which is, you know, a loss of about 80 million. I don't understand that, but they did come out and say that BBC presenters should not be political on Twitter, etc. Then, of course, the massive uproar from Gary, who loves to parrot his views, which no one's really that interested in anyway. And they capitulated and said, OK, fine, non-news presenters can tweet what they want to tweet. I don't understand it. I mean, yeah.
He seems to me to be someone who's become so popular, probably in his own mind, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, I say that from the heart, that he's now trying to push the buttons at the BBC just to see how far he can go. Because, of course, every time he does it, he makes national headlines. And I think that maybe the ego's got to...
Well, yeah, but why does the Beeb allow the stars to have such a power base, considering they are effectively public servants?
I know. And if you said to them... If I was an exec at the BBC and Gary Lineker was coming in and I had to save money, and I said, well, look, Gary, we're not going to pay you 1.3 million this year. We're going to pay you 200,000. I mean, what's he going to do? I suppose he might go to Sky, but what else is he going to do? There isn't an awful lot of places for someone like Gary Lineker to go now.
Now, Andy, are we being a bit harsh on Gary Lineker? He's got, I think, 9 million followers on Twitter or something. You know, he's very successful. Everything he touches turns to gold. He's got a big audience for Match of the Day. And other sporting coverage that he does. So are we being a bit harsh on him?
I'll be perfectly honest, I don't actually watch Match of the Day. I watch CBS with Kate Scott and Thierry Henry and Micah Richards. I don't watch Match of the Day.
Do you pay the licence fee or not?
What licence fee? No.
Wow.
No, I don't have a TV.
Do you support the idea of a licence fee?
I think in principle it's good to have a neutral state broadcaster, but I think that should probably be integrated into your taxes more than an individual licence fee. But when Gary Lineker left the Spurs in '92, people going, "Oh, will Spurs survive without him?" And 30 years on, they're still a mediocre team. So I'm sure that the BBC will live on after Gary Lineker departs.
Yeah, I mean, the people would argue that you have to pay top dollar for top talent, which is what Gary Lineker is, right? He brings millions of viewers wherever he goes. So is he worth the money?
Well, I think probably. As a trade unionist, I advocate for a fair wage for all workers, and as long as they're paying their producers and their runners well, I don't see a reason for him to have a decent salary.
Could I just quickly say, Mark, that I think a good comparison would be if you take Jeremy Clarkson and you look at what Jeremy Clarkson did with Top Gear, he made that into a worldwide brand with James May and Richard Hammond. And the BBC sold that programme all around the world and made millions and millions and millions. You can't say that about Gary Lineker on Match of the Day.
Clarkson notoriously ended up chinning a producer over a sandwich.
Yeah.
Good comparison. Nice.
Let me say that's understandable because producers can be very annoying, let me tell you. I mean, James is driving me mad today. OK, coming up, are the Falkland Islands safe in Sir Keir Starmer's hands? And should the new leader of the Conservatives bring back Boris? We'll debate that next.
Hello, good evening and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, as we head into the weekend, we can expect to see lots of fine weather to start, but it is gradually turning more unsettled from the west, so we can expect to see some wet and windy weather over the weekend. And that's because this area of high pressure, which has brought us that fine weather to end the working week, is generally being replaced by low pressure as it moves in from the west. And we'll start to see this evening as outbreaks of rain continue to push into the northwest. This a little bit heavy at times, particularly towards dawn, and turning quite blustery under those cloudier skies too. But elsewhere across much of England and Wales, there'll be plenty of clear skies overnight, so turning quite chilly. May even see some pockets of mist and fog by the morning. So quite a different start in the northwest to start the weekend. Plenty of cloud around and some outbreaks of rain, and it is going to be turning rather heavy at times, particularly in western parts. Similar across Northern Ireland, a fairly cloudy start with those outbreaks of rain just starting to push into the west. But elsewhere, there should be plenty of bright skies to start the weekend. As I say, some pockets of mist and fog around, and it will be a fairly chilly start. And then generally, there is still plenty of fine and dry weather across the country, plenty of sunny spells and feeling warm where you catch the sunshine. But that rain will gradually move in more and more across Scotland, Northern Ireland, with those outbreaks of rain, and still fairly blustery under those cloudier skies. And notice these brighter colours here, so some heavy rain moving its way into parts of the far southwest later into Saturday. But as I say, where you catch the sunshine with highs of 18 degrees, it should still feel rather pleasant for the time of year. Heading into Sunday, a fairly unsettled day, plenty of cloud across the country with some outbreaks of rain. This too could be heavy at times, particularly across the southwest, southern parts of Wales later into the day. And that generally leads us into an unsettled week next week. Generally temperatures turning more towards average. So make sure you enjoy the sunshine while it's here. Bye for now.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, this Sunday when I interview one of the most significant political figures of our era, Boris Johnson. Nothing will be off limits as we discuss his autobiography, Unleashed, and everything in it.
I failed to avert Megxit, but I did deliver Brexit. And I'm very, very happy to be on Camilla Tominey's show, Boris Johnson on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show on Sunday at 9:30 a.m. and again at 6 p.m.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
As we hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, are the Falklands and Gibraltar safe in the hands of Sir Keir Starmer? Alex Dyke.
The Chagos Islands are, I think I'm right in saying, 1,350 miles away from Mauritius. What the heck is going on? Why? I mean, the Falklands, when we staked our claim on the Falklands, Argentina wasn't even a country. So the people in Argentina, the people in Gibraltar, they want to remain British. I couldn't tell you about the Chagos Islands. I don't know enough about it, but I do know it's too far away from Mauritius, and why would we let China have any kind of stronghold, like you said in your monologue?
Indeed. Andy, it's unfair to lay this at the door of the new Prime Minister fully, isn't it? Because these negotiations started under former Foreign Secretary James Cleverly.
Yeah, I think there are the two key bits that predate the Labour government. In 2019, the International Court of Justice ruled that the continuing British occupation of the islands was illegal. And then in November 2022, just before he was dispatched as Foreign Secretary to Home Secretary, James Cleverly opened negotiations. So I think these are two key pieces of information that that do prove that it's quite difficult to go, oh, well, Lammy's incompetent, Keir Starmer hates Britain. I think, actually, the International Court of Justice ruled that it was illegal and cleverly opened the negotiations, so...
If Rishi Sunak was still Prime Minister, we can but dream. Do you think that he would have agreed to this, though?
I can't speak to the mindset
Would a
of
Conservative Prime Minister sign up for this?
Well, he did, didn't he, when he was...
Brakes on it, Mark. I think David Cameron put the brakes on it, didn't he?
They're all blaming each other.
What's the story?
Well, they're all blaming each other, of course. You know, Tom Tugendhat's blaming Cleverly.
Never do that.
Cleverly is blaming Liz Truss, and of course Liz Truss is blaming Boris Johnson. But it didn't go through. But the thing is, you know, 9 days before this announcement was made, ministers were still saying that no decision had been made. And I just can't understand how this, which is, you know, it's a huge national security threat to hand over to Mauritius, which is obviously a China-aligned country, the strategic islands. I just don't understand it.
Well, I think we should have hung on to it. I actually don't care about our reputation overseas. This is something you hear a lot about. I care about our reputation here and national security here and the British national interest. And someone that agrees with me is the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. This is him in conversation with Camilla Tominey. Take a listen.
Chagos Islands being given back to Mauritius. Your reaction?
Crazy. I mean, I urge viewers of GB News to get out your maps, get out your atlases, check out the Chagos Islands, see where they are, see where Mauritius is. A long way away.
Yes.
What is this claim? It's nonsense. It's total nonsense. Why are we doing this? Sheer political correctness.
So, Ellie Wheatley, that's the million-dollar question. Would a Conservative Prime Minister have signed this off?
One would hope not. One would hope that they would realise the value, also the financial value. And not only are we handing over the land, but we're also paying them as well. And, sorry, what about this black hole that the government keep talking about? And now we're handing over a hugely strategic asset over to a China-aligned country and also paying them at the same time.
Originally, the islanders inhabiting Chagos Islands were chucked out, treated very badly, and therefore Labour are righting a big moral wrong here, Alex.
Yeah, but that's from a different time, Mark. I wonder about Keir Starmer, and I don't want to keep going on about him, but when he took down the portrait of Margaret Thatcher 2 or 3 weeks ago at number 10 because it made him feel a little bit uncomfortable, I think maybe they should re-hang it and he should look at it for some inspiration, because we only have to think what she did for the Falklands.
OK, well, listen, I think you raise a very good point. Now, let me tell you that you can watch that full no-holds-barred interview on GB News this Sunday at 9:30. Boris Johnson and Camilla Tominey. Unmissable stuff. Now, amid a sleaze scandal, doom and gloom about the economy and the relinquishing of British sovereignty around the world, Boris Johnson's scandal-hit premiership is starting to look like the good old days. And even the chairman of the Tory party, Richard Fuller, is now admitting in an interview with GB News that ditching Boris was a mistake. Authoritarian lockdowns, the Partygate scandal, and a pathologically dishonest but entertaining Prime Minister in Johnson now resembles the stuff of dreams. Hand on heart, given the dreadful start he's made, how many people, if given a chance, wouldn't like to replace Sir Keir Starmer with Bojo himself? A return to upbeat speeches, wacky photo opportunities, and the general mood of cheer that the country is now so lacking. Yes, he limped from one disaster to another, and his claims about being stitched up by colleagues are utterly laughable, with Johnson being a man never suited for high office. But unlike the current incumbent in Downing Street, Johnson had a supernaturally good political instinct, choosing the Brexit cause over Remain all those years ago, and striking exactly the right note with voters in 2019, winning a landslide victory and keeping Jeremy Corbyn out of number 10. He might not have been good at his job, but he was very good at getting others to do theirs, ultimately deploying Lord David Frost to get Brexit across the line. As he releases his memoirs Unleashed, we're reminded of what we've lost and what we've replaced him with. Anyone that's read extracts from the book this week will feel like a contestant on Bullseye, staring at the speedboat they could have won, or in this case, gave away. When he left office in 2022, he deployed Arnold Schwarzenegger's catchphrase from Terminator 2, "Hasta la vista, baby." But I think much of the public would rather hear, "I'll be back." Boris is no Jesus Christ, but he deserves a second coming. Ellie Wheatley, would you agree?
Yes, I do agree. I mean, he was a great campaigner. Even Liz Truss at Tory conference was saying we would have won the election if he'd stayed in office. He was our best hope.
Couldn't have been worse, could it?
It couldn't have been worse, of course. Yeah, he's a great campaigner. Whether or not he will return soon, I think is quite unlikely. I mean, he might want to wait till 2028, make his millions doing his speeches and events, and then come back to fight Starmer. And he might even be our best chance, for the Tory party anyway, fighting Nigel Farage, I think.
Right, so the idea would be a year before the election, find a safe seat for Boris, parachute him in.
Or perhaps he, stands at a by-election beforehand, which might come up. Yeah, I think it's not impossible. Of course, we've seen former prime ministers make a historic comeback. David Cameron, the rest. And of course, we know that he's definitely not putting down his tools quite yet.
No, and Churchill did it, I think, in 51, having been dispatched in 45. Yeah. So I mean, the question is, does the public still have an appetite for Boris Johnson in politics, Alex?
I think they do. I think that if you look at Trump and Nigel Farage, they're Marmite, and to a certain extent, obviously, Boris is. But where he's so warm and likeable and is like a bumbling uncle who always seems to get things done, I think he's very forgivable.
Yeah, so he's not Marmite, is he? He's sort of shredless marmalade, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he always talks up Britain rather than Starmer, who always is talking down Britain, and actually people don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, Boris is a massive dilemma for the Tories going forward, isn't he, Alex? Andy.
Andy, I mean, I'm not a Tory. You'll have to ask one of those. But I think, Boris Johnson. I mean, it's why. I mean, are we getting commissioned for promoting his book Unleashed here? I mean, it's why.
I think the reason I asked this, and the reason we've put it into the show, is that I just wonder whether it's a political opportunity for the new leader of the Tory party to say, "I'm bringing Boris back." He's not going to be an MP for now, but he's going to be in the inner circle. He's going to be very visible, very present as part of my new project, whether that's Badenoch, Cleverly or Jenrick.
Well, you think, when he was ousted from Downing Street, there's no other way to say it. He was ousted, all of his cabinet, majority of his cabinet resigned. Even the PPSs were resigning. You're in trouble when they're resigning. I mean,
Lena wasn't happy.
No, furious.
Larry Cat, forget it.
Larry lost it. No, I don't think so. I think the way that the Tories really can rebuild is listening to Lord Kempsell and Grant Shapps with this new Conservative Together movement. They put out this fantastic report. You know, I'm a paid-up Labour member, but I thought their report was fantastic. It was, you know, talking about the local and national disconnect, the mess that is CCHQ, how the rural votes changed, how they really need to focus in on their demographics. And if they won 2% more of the electoral, the electorate, then they would have won the election. I think that is the way forward, not bringing back Boris, who was ousted.
But he's still very popular. I mean, I remember during the campaign when Rishi was doing his final sort of hustings, whatever, and Boris had a surprise, you know, come back and delivered a speech, and everyone was shouting, Boris, 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 and CCHQ were trying to start up a chant going, Rishi, 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 which were drowned out by the Boris chant.
You know, a great gig for... Sorry to interrupt. I think a great gig for Boris now would be London mayor again, because he was a terrific mayor for London.
Yeah, Conservative mayor. Why not? Chuck Sadiq Khan out. But also, just briefly, the political leverage that would give the new Tory party leader in terms of bringing the party together, going, look, I represent old and new, and I'm bringing Boris back into the fold, into the family.
What is interesting is Boris has said he's not going to come out in support of any of the candidates. He's said, I mean, whether or not he does a surprise one, who knows. Jenrick, in his Tory conference speech, had a video which featured Boris Johnson in it, which was, I thought, quite interesting. And he is, obviously, the bookies favour him to win. Whether or not that changes, we'll have to see. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he offers an olive branch to Boris, said, yes, I'll bring him back, whether or not, he, as you say in the Commons, maybe not, but in some form, one way or another. And I think you're right. I think the membership would love it.
There you go. Fascinating stuff. Well, listen, lots more to get through. Here's a question for you. Will Labour voters be next to turn their support to Reform UK? And does that make Nigel Farage Britain's next Prime Minister? We'll debate that next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
A furious online debate has been sparked after, well, let's just say a rather large man, I mean, he really was big, was snapped trying to fit into his seat on the plane.
It's led to some to ask whether obese passengers should have to pay for extra plane seats so they don't inconvenience others.
Some say, though, that's cruel. So should plus-size passengers pay extra for plane seats? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, who's in Stratford-upon-Avon, and the director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, who's in beautiful Harrogate. Good to see you both this morning. Sarah, what do you think?
Well, we've had this debate before with Steve and I, to be fair, and I think it's one of those things where planes are just not fit for purpose anymore. So people's bodies have been growing over the years. We know this, the obesity rates are increasing, etc. But what's happening to planes is the seats are decreasing in size. So they're just not fit for purpose and not fit for the population. So I think it's just one of these things where we need to be more empathetic to people, that they're trying to fit into an environment that isn't shaped for them at all. So I think we do need to kind of say, well, what's right here? Is it the person not being able to fit in the seat, or is it the seat not being fit for purpose for the person? And I think we need to really, look at things from that perspective as well. Instead of thinking the person's doing something wrong, how about the environment might be doing something wrong?
Steve?
It's not about blaming, but the message you can't put out, in my opinion, is that it's okay to be obese and don't worry about it. You see, what I'm saying here is free plane seats. If you're offering free plane seats, an extra seat, that's going to normalise obesity.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, this Sunday when I interview one of the most significant political figures of our era, Boris Johnson. Nothing will be off limits as we discuss his autobiography, Unleashed, and everything in it.
I failed to avert Megxit, but I did deliver Brexit. And I'm very, very happy to be on Camilla Tominey's show, Boris Johnson on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show on Sunday at 9:30 a.m. and again at 6 p.m.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
As Nigel Farage this week reveals, he's now got his eyes set on disgruntled Labour supporters. Could left-wing voters, as well as fed-up Conservatives, win Reform UK the next election? Andy Twelves.
No, I don't think so. I mean, majority of the disgruntled Labour voters are to the left of the party about the party stances on Gaza and winter fuel payments and stuff like that. So I think Farage would have quite an interesting go trying to pick up the post-Corbyn left.
What about the Red Wall, though? He could clean up in north of Watford, couldn't
he? He could. I mean, I could. Anyone could. But, he only held Ashfield and won Boston, 2 out of, the 100 seats that are considered Red Wall. He only has 29 out of 17,000 councillors in the UK, and only 5 of those were actually elected. The rest have been defectors from Conservative Party or Independent. Where is this force to be reckoned with? Yeah, he got a lot of votes, but we don't live in a PR system. If you look at the councils, he's not done very well in the local elections earlier this year. I just don't see it. I don't see this big Farage wave.
With his message of common sense and patriotism, don't you think that he could win back those Red Wall seats, of course, successfully won by Boris Johnson in 2019 and lost in July of this year by the Tories?
I don't think people are that thick, really. When Boris Johnson said it, there was a genuine chance that he was going to win government and he'd be able to enact the policies that he was talking about. Reform are a fringe small party. They can say whatever they want, but they're never going to get anywhere near the government benches. And if you look at the skirmishes between the grassroots and the parliamentary leadership about this Tommy Robinson issue over the last couple of weeks, I just don't see it. I don't see them as a legitimate logistical force.
I think Andy Twelves is in denial. I think the left should be very worried about Reform UK, Alex.
I think so, because I think the left, the one thing that Labour have done is it's very possibly they're going to talk us into a recession. Any decent estate agent would tell you that actually a lot of it is to do with confidence. And I think the one thing that Boris and Nigel do really, really well is they think Britain's great. They say Britain's great. I think they should be worried, because I think the Nigel Farage we see now is a lot different to the one we saw 2 or 3 years ago. It's no longer a little bit of a tiny little party. I know they've only got 5 MPs, but yeah, watch this space.
Yes, Ellie, a war on 2 fronts for Nigel Farage. Labour voters, especially sort of working class Northern Labour voters, who are perhaps sort of culturally more conservative, and ex-Tory voters.
Yeah.
With that, they win, perhaps?
Well, I think, honestly, first of all, immigration is still the #1 issue that everyone talks about. We've seen the Tories fail on it, and obviously we're seeing Labour failing on it. Within the first 3 months, there were 10,000 Channel migrants that crossed the Channel.
Well, they haven't had time to affect real change, in fairness.
But we also haven't
Andy, are you telling me that Labour will stop the boats in the next 4 years?
I think they will, yes.
Really?
Wow, where'd you get that from?
I think that there will be a refresh and reset of relations with the EU that will allow us to have the necessary cross-channel relations to be able to stop them coming over.
By accepting 100,000 every year?
Well, it's better to have 100,000 legal than a higher unknown number of illegal.
Well, I think also the issue that Nigel also talks about is legal migration, and the vast amount of numbers, 700,000 net migration legal, and also they are costing the economy in many different ways. There have been lots of studies that have just come out about it. The sort of low-skilled migrants are costing the taxpayer. So a lot of people see this and they go, who's going to help me out on this issue? Not the Tories, not Labour, Nigel Farage. And as you say, common sense, he's talking Britain up, which we want to hear. And as exactly what you were saying as well, Labour have scared off investment already by talk of their painful budget.
Yeah.
Completely the wrong way about going about it.
Well, indeed. It's sort of Tory votes, disgruntled Labour voters. The maths start to look good for reform, don't they? And they've got 4 years to campaign now.
They do, and it's a long time in politics. I think the hard part was getting the 5 MPs in the Commons in the first place. And now they are a proper party, and they're not just a business or a company. I think they do have a serious chance of winning.
Very interesting. Well, we've been talking about Boris Johnson. His new book is out. He'll be promoting it with Camilla Tominey on Sunday morning. Here's a taste of what to expect.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, this Sunday when I interview one of the most significant political figures of our era, Boris Johnson. Nothing will be off limits as we discuss his autobiography, Unleashed, and everything in it.
I failed to avert Megxit, but I did deliver Brexit. And I'm very, very happy to be on Camilla Tominey's show, Boris Johnson on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show on Sunday at 9:30 a.m. and again at 6 p.m.
Camilla Tominey and Boris Johnson at 9:30 a.m. Sunday morning. Unmissable telly, as is Patrick Christie's, who's up next.
Yes, OK, the slippery slope of assisted dying. Are old people going to be encouraged to bump themselves off to protect our beloved NHS? Jonathan Reynolds, should he resign over this cash for access scandal? Boris is back in the media. We've got an exclusive clip of him revealing the truth between him and Prince Harry. But also, I've got Starmer and Boris's rap sheet side by side. And I'm asking you, who is actually dodgier? The £22 billion black hole that Labour talk about, they've already spent that on carbon capture that might not even work. And Starmer refuses to rule out giving away the Falklands and Gibraltar. It's all to play for.
Brilliant stuff, Patrick. Patrick is live from 30. I think you'll agree, a fabulous debut from Ellie Wheatley, and of course, more excellent work from Alex Dyke and Andy Twelves. Thank you for your company. I'm back for Mark Dolan tonight, 9 to 11, tomorrow and Sunday. Don't forget, we've got My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10. Hamilton's tomorrow night, covering the big stories of the day, as well as my all-star panel. So thank you for watching and listening. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. Patrick's next. Keep it GB News.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, as we head into the weekend, we can expect to see lots of fine weather to start, but it is gradually turning more unsettled from the west, so we can expect to see some wet and windy weather over the weekend. And that's because this area of high pressure, which has brought us that fine weather to end the working week, is generally being replaced by low pressure as it moves in from the west. And we'll start to see this evening as outbreaks of rain continue to push into the northwest. This a little bit heavy at times, particularly towards dawn, and turning quite blustery under those cloudier skies too. But elsewhere across much of England and Wales, there'll be plenty of clear skies overnight, so turning quite chilly. May even see some pockets of mist and fog by the morning. So quite a different start in the northwest to start the weekend. Plenty of cloud around and some outbreaks of rain, and it is going to be turning rather heavy at times, particularly in western parts. Similar across Northern Ireland, a fairly cloudy start with those outbreaks of rain just starting to push into the west. But elsewhere, there should be plenty of bright skies to start the weekend. As I say, some pockets of mist and fog around, and it will be a fairly chilly start. And then generally, there is still plenty of fine and dry weather across the country, plenty of sunny spells and feeling warm where you catch the sunshine. But that rain will gradually move in more and more across Scotland, Northern Ireland, with those outbreaks of rain, and still fairly blustery under those cloudier skies. And notice these brighter colours here, so some heavy rain moving its way into parts of the far southwest later into Saturday. But as I say, where you catch the sunshine with highs of 18 degrees, it should still feel rather pleasant for the time of year. Heading into Sunday, a fairly unsettled day, plenty of cloud across the country with some outbreaks of rain. This too could be heavy at times, particularly across the southwest, southern parts of Wales later into the day. And that generally leads us into an unsettled week next week. Generally temperatures turning more towards average. So make sure you enjoy the sunshine while it's here. Bye for now.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed Heat Pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive